Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Plainswalker by M.A. Rothman. Narrated by Tim Campbell. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Arthur C. Clarke. International Science Foundation, ISF 24/7, Computer Scientist Cyber Division. Posting type: Current Permanent Employee or Referral. Posting ID: PERME-A15293-1. Recruiting location: Washington, D.C. Department: D-16 Technical Operations Unit. Key requirements: must be a current permanent employee or referred by a current senior GS-14+ member of the Cyber Division. Must be able to obtain a top-secret security clearance. Must be between the ages of 23 and 36 years of age. Must meet all physical requirements. If currently active duty in the military, must be within 15 months of completing your service before submitting your application. Major duties. The specific details will be discussed once selected. However, the ideal candidate will have the following background: familiarity with both black and white box testing, a self-starter with strong organizational skills and the ability to memorize complex instructions, Q course qualified, MCMAP black belt or equivalent CQC experience, which can include civilian martial arts background at second dan or better. This is my story. My name is Peabo Smith. I'm a former Green Beret from the 1st Special Forces Group out of JBLM. I spent a few years in the sandbox with the best people I've ever known until one day while on leave I got into a car accident and my life changed forever. I'm fine now, but it was a gut punch when I had to leave my brothers behind and start life over as a civilian. I went back to school, got my master's, and everything was going according to plan. And then I got an amazing opportunity. It looked like it might be a chance to get back into the action, but through another government agency. Little did I know that the action I'd end up seeing was nothing like what any of my time in the desert had prepared me for. This is my story. Chapter 1. In an isolated room 50 feet under Marine Base Quantico, Jolie lay back in what looked like a dentist's chair with an IV hooked up to her right arm and a rat's nest of wires trailing off of her. The monitoring devices beeped incessantly as a pair of nurses checked and double-checked the equipment settings. "Miss LeChance, your heart's racing at almost 130 beats per minute. Can you please try to stay calm?" Jolie rolled her eyes. "You can't exactly blame me for being excited about this." The nurse was covered from head to toe with sterile garb, but behind her face shield Jolie saw the hints of a smile. "Honey, I understand. Under other circumstances I'd give you a sedative, but I can't give you anything that might interfere with the serum's effectiveness. Just do me a favor and breathe deeply and slowly. I don't want you having a heart attack before we even start." "Fine, I'll do what I can," Jolie said, but there was only so much she could do to calm herself. After all, she was about to make history. A speaker in the ceiling crackled and a man's voice broadcast through the room. "Lunchroom Alpha reporting." The nurse picked up a red phone attached to the wall. "I've hung the serum and we'll go for a launch." The second nurse lowered a device from the ceiling that looked vaguely like a submarine's periscope. She eased the viewfinder against Jolie's forehead. "Focus on the flashing lights. It'll help the scanner synchronize with your brain signals and turn whatever you see over there into a coherent datagram for the computers to interpret." Jolie looked into the viewfinder and heard a click. Soon a warm sensation was creeping up her arm and up into her neck. That must be the serum wending its way into her. As she watched the flashing green and red lights, the nurse's voice slowly faded, and then so did the lights. Jolie lost all sense of her surroundings. It was almost like— no, it was exactly like she was a disembodied mind in a dark room. A faint voice echoed from somewhere around her. "LeChance launched." The Watcher's sacred duty is to keep the secret of the Nameless One, keep watch over the plains, and when a Plainswalker comes north, seek them out and lend whatever assistance they need. Ivan was a Watcher. For 30 years he'd watched over the arid plains that bordered the great central forest, and only twice had he seen a Plainswalker cross from their hidden home rumored to be somewhere on the southern coast of the island. Each time the Plainswalker traveled north, made a complete circuit of the island, and returned to their home, hidden from whoever might try to find them. It had been at least 10 years since his last Plainswalker sighting. A loud rumbling erupted from somewhere high above, and Ivan craned his neck to look up. What in the... A blinding bolt of white-hot light pierced the clouds and slammed into the grassy plains less than a mile away. The pillar of light released a keening wail, and the very ground began to tremble beneath his feet. Then a billowing shimmer raced outward from the light, moving across the plains in all directions. The searing wind hit Ivan and blew him head over heels like he was a fallen leaf. He felt his hair curling up in the heat as the non-stop torrent blasted against him. The world was on fire. And then it stopped. The light, the heat, the shrieking sound, they all vanished. They left only destruction in their wake. The plains were now a steaming expanse of sand, glass, and destruction. All that had been was now gone. Ivan pushed himself to his feet, amazed that he hadn't broken anything. And as he looked across the desolate and burnt countryside, he spotted someone. By some miracle, despite the devastation that had just occurred, there was someone walking north. Ivan's mouth fell open with shock. A Plainswalker was heading straight for him. "Hey, Bo, how goes it?" Peabo Smith rolled off the sofa and onto the floor, groaning and blinking the sleep from his eyes. Who is this?" "It's Nolan from the dojo. Is it too early to call?" Peabo sat up, fumbling with his cell phone as he squinted at the digital clock on the cable box. It was 8 a.m., and he'd gotten a whole 2 hours of sleep. "Oh, it's fine, I'm awake. What's up?" "Well, I'm at work and just found out about an opportunity that might be up your alley. You still looking for a job?" Peabo racked his brain trying to remember what this guy did for a living, but came up with nothing. All he knew for sure was that he was another of the senior students at the dojo, like him. "I've got some feelers out there, but I'm kind of up for anything at this point." "Why? Where do you work?" "Well, it's a government position. You said you're ex-Special Forces?" "Yep, and I'd probably still be in the Army if I hadn't got into a car accident and busted up my ankle." "Yes, but that's obviously all healed now. You're degreed, right? You mentioned something about a dissertation. Do you have a master's?" "Yes. After I got medically discharged from the Army, I went back to Georgetown, got my master's, and just finished up the research for my dissertation. Hopefully land the PhD in a couple months." "Awesome. Well, I can't really say too much about what the job entails, but if you're okay with it, I'd like to file this referral with HR, which should generate an invite for you. This isn't something that anyone can just apply for. What's your email address?" Peabo got a sense of wrongness about this kind gesture from a guy he barely knew, but he was also hungry to start up the income stream again, so he spelled out his email. "Okay, sent. You should get something any second now. Hopefully it'll be self-explanatory." "Nolan, I don't mean to sound ungrateful, but I'm wondering why I suddenly looked your name up on the dojo roster and called you out of the blue. What's my angle?" Peabo chuckled and ran his fingers through his unruly mop of hair. "Well, yeah. Truthfully, I get $500 for a referral if you take the job, so I figured it couldn't hurt to poke you and see if you're in the market. You mind just checking to see if you got an email yet?" "Hang on." Peabo grabbed his laptop, set it on his lap, and pulled up his email. "Yep, just got something. You work for the International Science Foundation?" "Give or take," Nolan said with an airy tone. "Do you live in Arlington?" "Yeah, why?" "That'll give you a pretty good bump in locality pay. I'm telling you, this is a pretty sweet offering for someone just finishing out their degree, if you can get it." Peabo scanned the email. It looked like a job application for a computer scientist, but some of the requirements were unexpected. "Nolan, why does a computer job need someone with martial arts or special forces experience?" "Oh, they always list stuff on these things that's meaningless. Like I said, I can't say much about what I do, but I can tell you that the biggest fight I got into in the last 3 years working here was with the copy machine. Don't worry about it. You're a 3rd Dan black belt, and I figure you're testing for your 4th stripe soon enough. That plus your special forces background will be more than enough to impress these pasty-faced types I work with." Nolan laughed, but to Peabo it sounded fake, and his spidey senses tingled. Then again, he couldn't exactly afford to be picky. Everything was so damned expensive around here, even for a guy living in a crappy 1-bedroom apartment. The GI Bill and his savings would only last so long before he'd have to make some drastic life decisions. "Okay, I guess I'll fill this out and send it off today." "Cool. Well, I gotta catch a meeting. I hope things work out. I really do." Talk at you later. Peabo shook his head as Nolan hung up. Yep, you have 500 reasons to hope it works out. Still, a job was a job. His mind drifted back to the odd requirements. Martial arts, special forces. After his medical discharge, he knew he'd never get to be on the A-team again. But who knew? Maybe this was a sneak path into a position that could get him back into some kind of action. That would be too good to be true. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Peabo pulled up the online application and began filling it out. In a location nearly 100 feet directly beneath the White House, a man shook his head. She's dead? I'm afraid so, said Jerry, the lab director, though the furrow between his eyebrows was the only outward sign of frustration at the experiment having gone awry. The man didn't care for Jerry's seeming lack of concern. Jerry, I've promised headway on this during the current administration's tenure, and I don't need to remind you that STAG's black bag operations cannot stay hidden without the cooperation of the executive branch. You were all giddy during the operation, so what happened? Jerry raked his fingers through his thick graying hair. Honestly, we're not yet sure. She had a normal medical screening before we started, and there weren't any signs of heart problems. The man cut him off, and yet she's dead. He slid the photo of the dead engineer across the table toward Jerry. Feeling his impatience rising, he growled, Did we get anything? Anything at all? We got confirmation of arrival, the lab director said eagerly. The serum worked just fine. We got some images of the target, though none of the memories stuck where they should. And since she coded on the way back, we couldn't get much out of her other than what was transmitted. Turned out she had memory retention of a gnat. I don't understand. What difference does that make? The serum works on certain parts of the brain, like the prefrontal cortex. It allows us to get a working stream of data out of the subject, pulling key memories and visual spatial awareness out of various parts of the brain. Basically, as our gal sees stuff, we can pick up the signals in a way that we can interpret. But if your memory is somehow impaired, or as in this case, if it just generally sucks, the serum's effectiveness is reduced. So what's your plan for round 2? We have another test engineer currently being put through memory training, but we're also doubling up for this round. I want to stagger 2 test subjects, one after the other, so I've already put feelers out for another test engineer while we make more of the serum. And how long before the new tests start? 2 months, Jerry said sheepishly. We're trying to speed up the process for creating the serum, but that's where we're at. The man took a deep breath and let it out slowly, trying hard not to let his anger take over. Beating Jerry to the wolves would be premature. So much had been invested in this, and none of them would get another chance if this failed. Round 2 had to work. You've got 2 months, he said at last. But make sure these test subjects have working tickers this time. The suits upstairs aren't going to tolerate any more delays, you understand? We need proof that this stuff is real. No more failures, Jerry. Am I understood? Jerry nodded. Understood. 6 weeks later. Peabo showed his new ISF badge to the corporal at the entrance to Marine Base Quantico, and the Marine waved him through. It took him another 15 minutes to drive through the giant base, following the printed instructions he'd been given at his recruiting station in D.C. He passed 2 other checkpoints and countless turns before parking in front of an unmarked concrete building. The lot had room for maybe 100 cars, but his was one of only 4 present, and there wasn't another soul in sight. He swiped his badge at the building's unmanned entrance, and the metal door lowered into the ground. Peabo stepped across the threshold, and the door immediately sprang up and shut with a loud metallic clang. A set of blinding lights beamed directly onto him. Mr. Smith, welcome to STAG. STAG was shorthand for the Special Technologies Analysis Group. It was one of the few facts Peabo had been told prior to accepting the position, and it didn't really explain anything. He was also told that STAG was a division of the ISF that worked with cutting-edge technology, but they couldn't share much about it until he handed in his SF-86 forms, which were the papers he needed to fill out to get his security clearance straightened out. It was pretty clear that whatever it was they did here, it was covert stuff that no civilians were ever supposed to know about. Please step forward and place your feet onto the red tiles located in front of the inner door. Look straight ahead with your arms at your sides. Peabo did as the disembodied voice instructed. A green light flashed into his eyes, and several clicks sounded from somewhere nearby. He felt a sudden change in air pressure, and his ears popped. Identity confirmed. Do you have your paperwork filled out as instructed? Peabo held up the folder that contained his completed SF-86 forms. Yes. The metal door lowered before him, revealing a middle-aged woman on the other side. She was attractive, with raven hair, and her exotic perfume lingered in the air as she motioned him forward and held out her hand. Your paperwork, please. Peabo stepped through the doorway into a lobby, and just as before, the door behind him whooshed upward. As he handed over his forms, he glanced back at the door nervously. It had to weigh hundreds of pounds. Anyone ever get squished by the overzealous hydraulics attached to that thing? The woman chuckled as she beckoned him forward. Don't worry. Those doors all have sensors. It's startling at first, but trust me, you get used to it. And they definitely help enforce the no tailgating rule, which I'm sure they went over with you during your security briefing. One person through a badged-in entrance at a time. She spoke with a slight New York accent, but not the kind Peabo remembered hearing on the streets. Hers had a posh sound to it, the kind he imagined belonged on Park Avenue. The sound of her heels clicked rapidly on the marble floor, and he fast-walked to catch up to her. Ma'am, do you have any idea how long it'll be before I'm told what I'll be doing? It's not ma'am, it's Susan. And to answer your question, it varies. She led him into a brightly lit hallway dotted with closed office doors. A sign up ahead read Classrooms and had an arrow pointing to the right. I know you've been brought in for one of the test engineer slots, but seeing as your forms have been given a high priority, I'm guessing it might be a project that I don't have clearance for. These security clearance forms sometimes take months to process, especially for top-secret clearances, but when the intel guys get a file it under their butts, stuff can happen quickly. Either way, I wouldn't worry too much about it. You've got some specialized training ahead of you that you'll need to finish before you can even begin your assignment. She stopped at the open door of a small classroom with a dozen chairs and a projector hanging from the ceiling, projecting the word STAG on the white wall. Grab a seat and relax, she said. I'll send in the instructor as soon as he arrives. Before she could leave, Peabo asked, Is there a supply cabinet where I can get a pencil and notebook or something? I was told to bring nothing into work and that I'd be given everything I need. The woman tilted her head and stared at him for a few seconds before saying, You won't need anything for this type of class. As she walked away, Peabo couldn't help but wonder, what the hell kind of classroom training doesn't need me to take notes? Peabo stared at the clock on the wall as the minutes ticked by. The woman had given no indication of how long it would be before the instructor arrived, but just before 9 a.m. he began to hear the sounds of people walking unseen along the corridor. The place was slowly waking up. Then the classroom door swung open, and a middle-aged man in glasses and a lab coat walked in. He plopped himself on top of the desk at the front of the room, shifted slightly so he was facing Peabo, and gave him a warm smile. Good morning, Mr. Smith. I'm sure you have a bunch of questions, but instead of asking them, let's dive into a visualization exercise, okay? Peabo wasn't sure what that even meant, but he agreed. Sure. Great. I want you to close your eyes and think of your childhood home. Don't worry if you lived in several places, just pick the one you remember the best. Imagine you're standing outside in front of it. Do you have that image in your head? Peabo closed his eyes and nodded. I do. This next part might sound strange, but eventually you'll see why I'm doing this. Imagine a bunch of naked people on oversized versions of those big wheels we used to ride around as kids. With an uncomfortable smile, Peabo recalled some of the memories he had from the one time he'd ever visited a nude beach. It wasn't a pretty sight. Now, imagine that these naked people are riding past you, sweaty, jiggling, lots of grunting as they go by. They ride right up to your home, and instead of stopping, they crash into the door, and bodies are flung in every direction. Broken parts of the big wheels come rolling back toward you. You weave your way past the awkward scene and step into your home. You pause, appreciating the sunlight streaming in, and you notice that it's shining down onto Big Bird. Yes, the same one from Sesame Street. I'm sure you're familiar with him. The big bright yellow bird from Sesame Street waves at you from his perch on an enormous tan horse. Your nose tickles a bit as if you accidentally inhale one of his downy yellow feathers. Peabo shook his head as he wondered what in the world kind of training this was. The inside of your home smells a bit like the horse as you walk into the kitchen, where you find the Swedish chef from the Muppets. He says a string of gobbledygook as he rapidly chops vegetables, which fly in every direction. You turn and walk into the living room, and there you find Madonna writhing around on your coffee table singing Like a Virgin, and then you open your eyes. Go ahead and open your eyes. Peabo opened his eyes and saw that the instructor was now pacing back and forth at the front of the classroom. "Mr. Smith, have you ever seen those people who can stare at a deck of cards spread out face up, or maybe several decks of cards, and after just a few minutes they can recite in order the layout of all of them? Or maybe they can do the same trick with hundreds of phone numbers or people's names. Ever seen people perform those feats on TV?" Sure. There were plenty of times Peabo had wished he could do that kind of stuff when he was studying for tests. The instructor pulled up a chair, turned it around, and sat facing Peabo. "Would it surprise you to hear that these people weren't savants? Most of the people who can do those things have average intellect, as well as average memories. They've simply trained themselves through techniques that I'll teach you. And these aren't new techniques either. This is stuff that the ancient Greeks used to do all the time. Thousands of years ago, we didn't have near-instant access to the world's knowledge, so it was much more common to exercise our memory in ways that might seem unnecessary now. I'll give you an example. Do you remember the phone number for the home you grew up in?" Peabo nodded. "Okay, but I'd wager that you don't remember most, if any, of the numbers you dial frequently today. Am I right?" Peabo smiled and nodded. The guy was right. There was a local Chinese restaurant that he called every week, but he never needed to memorize their number. It was programmed into his phone. "Think about it," said the instructor. "Over the years, we've made it very easy for us humans to offload our memories to outside devices. Whether it's papyrus scrolls, books, photos, computers, or smartphones, we created ways of storing our memories so that they'll never be lost, as long as we don't lose the storage device. But before such advances, people had no choice but to remember things, or lose them forever. And there's a trade-off. We now lean so heavily on technology, we've stopped training ourselves to remember things. To have the facts right there," he snapped his fingers, "whenever you need them." He drummed his fingers on the back of the chair. "Mr. Smith, what I'm going to teach you to do is something that's already part of our human toolbox. It's just a tool that we rarely use. And when we're done, the way you remember things will have changed. We're going to leverage the parts of your brain associated with spatial and visual recognition and turn those parts into an assistant of sorts. An assistant that will help you remember things, like our ancient ancestors used to. I could talk at length about the science behind the technique, going in depth on the topic of elaborative encoding, but instead let's talk about something more practical. Something called the Baker-Baker paradox. It goes like this. Imagine I walk up to a person and tell them, please remember that there is someone named Baker, and then I go to another person to whom I say, please remember that there is a person who is a Baker. Now imagine I come back to these same people sometime later and ask them to recall what I said to them. It is much more likely that the second person, the one who was told about a man who is a baker, would remember that fact than it is that the first person, the one who was told about someone with the name of Baker, would remember. Do you have any theories as to why that might be?" Peabo pondered the question for a moment. "Well, when you said the guy was a baker, I suppose I had a visual of some guy with a chef's hat or something, whereas some guy named Baker gave me no such image or connection." The instructor smiled. "Exactly right. The name Baker is just a bit of data bouncing around in your head, but the concept of a baker has a bunch of potential cognitive connections it can make. You might remember the smell of freshly baked bread, funny white hats, flour everywhere. All of those things, those details, images, connections, they help you in recalling that random piece of data you were asked to remember." Peabo nodded. They made sense. "In general," continued the instructor, "humans are not good at remembering random facts and figures, but we have exceptional visual and spatial memories. For example, if I asked you to repeat the first 10 words that I spoke to you upon entering the classroom, you'd probably have a hard time of it. But what if I asked you who was riding on the horse?" Peabo smiled at the image that popped into his mind's eye. Big Bird, and it was a tan horse. The instructor grinned. "And now the lesson begins." Chapter 2. Peabo walked into the conference room and smiled when he saw a familiar face at the table. "Hey, Nolan, did you get your $500? Nolan laughed as Peabo took a seat. "Are you kidding me? When you owe the government, you damn well better pay on time. If they owe you, well, they will pay you, but on their own schedule. At least they acknowledged that they owed me something. I got an email saying that Peabo Smith had started his probationary period. Speaking of which, I didn't know your name was Peabo. That's a pretty cool name." "I suppose, but no one calls me that, just Bo. And yes, my dad was a huge fan of the singer." Peabo immediately regretted mentioning his father. He died only a year ago in a car accident, and it still tore him up inside. "So are you here for the same briefing I am?" Nolan shrugged. "No idea. This meeting just landed on my calendar, and here I am." At that moment, a gray-haired man entered the room. He wore a lab coat, but underneath was an expensive suit, and Peabo got the impression this was no ordinary lab tech. The man closed the door behind him, then pressed a button on a handheld remote. The lock clicked, and there was a sudden change in the air pressure. He then took a seat at the table and nodded to both Nolan and Peabo. "Mr. Tomlinson, Mr. Smith, I'm Jerry Calloway, director of STAG. I'm the guy who's going to brief you on the basics of your assignment." Peabo leaned forward. "Does this mean I received my clearances?" "Yes, you were cleared as of last night, which allows me to brief you both at the same time. In fact, you two are going to be working as a team, one backing up the other. But before I continue..." He pulled an index card from his suit jacket and began reading from it. "I am formally informing you that both audio and visual recordings are being made of whatever transpires in this room. The data I am about to divulge is classified in nature, and you are obligated to keep all that is said in this room in confidence. Violating such confidence will result in immediate termination and federal prosecution." He looked up from the card. "Do you both understand what I've said and realize that violating this confidence may subject you to many years in federal prison?" "I understand," Peabo and Nolan said at the same time. Calloway nodded. "I need you two to realize that I'm reading you into a highly classified government project. You aren't allowed to discuss any details or even the existence of this project with anyone outside of a controlled list of other read-in members. You will be provided with a secure USB key that, coupled with a biometric verification, will give you access to secure facilities on this site. Only in these skiffs will you— sir?" Nolan lifted his hand. "Just to be sure we're all on the same page, can you go over what a skiff is?" Without missing a beat, the director said, "Sensitive, compartmented information facility. Skiff. Just think of it as a secured facility for classified material. In the skiff, you'll have access to the identification of the other read-in members and other material that you'll be given clear instructions on how to handle. No information from that room leaves that room ever. Now, I'm sure you guys are wondering what you'll be doing. To begin with, I need to give you a bit of background. STAG works on cutting-edge research in a variety of fields. Some of what our researchers work on would seem like total science fiction to the public. The project you two have been recruited to help us on is one of the most cutting-edge projects we have, and its goals are the loftiest ones we've ever set. We believe it will revolutionize how humanity looks at the universe." "The universe?" Nolan said skeptically. "Yes, Mr. Tomlinson, the universe. I'm sure you've both heard of the concept of the multiverse. The universe is other than our own. We're heavily focused on some of the more speculative aspects of brain cosmology. To be honest, a couple of years ago I wouldn't have thought it possible, but—" He must have seen the confused looks on the men's faces as he paused. "Think of it this way." The director held up both hands with his palms facing each other. There was only a hair's breadth separating them. "Imagine my left hand is our universe, and my right hand is some other universe we can't see. Each universe is like a bubble with just a tiny membrane separating the two realities. They're infinitely close, and yet they might as well be infinitely far apart. Until now, we've come up with something that will allow us to pierce the veil between these two universes. Just imagine having our consciousness travel to another dimension, another world, and then come back." He slid a folder across the table. "Here, take a look." Peabo opened the manila folder and set it between him and Nolan. Inside were several grainy photographs, low-resolution images of some arid wasteland. "What you're looking at," said Calloway, "is a place that none of us could see even with our most powerful telescopes. That," he gestured to the photograph Peabo had just flipped to, "is a planet with what seems to be breathable air. It's just a bit cooler than this room is right now, and we detected the scent of burning wood." Peabo knew he should probably be in read-only mode, especially in front of the guy who could probably get him insta-fired, but he had to ask. "I don't get it, sir. Are you saying this is from a different universe? And yet you're describing smells. Temperature readings? Does that mean someone's been there?" "All good questions," said Calloway. "Yes, this is a different universe. And yes, someone's been there. In a way. We didn't take a rocket, if that's what you're thinking. Didn't need to. As I said, this other universe is infinitely close. It's like going from one side of a coin to the flip side. It's a short route. You just have to find a way to drill through. And that's what we did. However, we haven't yet found a way to send anything physical through that hole. Thus far, we've only been able to send a digitized stream of data, a consciousness, if you will, from here to there." Which explains how...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?